Next, it's my pleasure to bring back up the one and only Bob Rosner.
Maybe it was LBJ who underestimated the value of passion and persistence in being an effective mayor. Mayor Mike McGinn.
Wow, that's the best introduction I've ever gotten. It's really great. Actually, I'm seeing Mark Akuzaki. Al Sugiyama gave me a great one day, too. So if you ever need a good intro, Bob and Al Sugiyama are the people you want. You know, I have dropped 50 pounds, and I'm now trying to key off some of the things he said. I have dropped 50 pounds because, you know, you got to be in shape for this job. You just have to be in shape every day. You're going 10 rounds, and I decided I needed to get in shape for this job. And LBJ, he can say what he will. I've got the best job in the world because I happen to be the mayor of the best city in the world, and that's just awesome. You know, it's the snowstorm, the protests, DOJ report. We are there, and I don't have prepared remarks. I'm going to apologize for that right now. I don't have prepared remarks. And I actually am going to try to do 5 minutes and get straight to Q&A because that's always the best stuff. And so I'll probably go 7 or 8, but let's see if I can do 5. We have had some storms. We had an economic storm hit us. It was huge, right? We went from the top of the peak to the bottom, lost 35,000 jobs in this city. Since then, from the bottom to today, we've regained 10,000 jobs. So we're seeing some signs of life, but we have not nearly, that's 25,000 jobs yet not regained. And we can see it in our friends and neighbors and families, and it's touched everybody in a much more direct way. It's not just some people aren't making it. A lot of people weren't making it, and people we knew. And it really caused us to start re-examining what was important. We saw the Occupy movement take up occupation here in our downtown. Nationwide, a majority of Americans identify with either the Tea Party or the Occupy movement. Think about that. Majority of Americans. Nationwide, it's about evenly split. I think in Seattle, it's probably more identified with Occupy. 56% of Americans said they identified with one or the other. I worked with a congressman years and years ago, and he had this saying is, government's like a shoe. You don't notice it unless it doesn't fit. And a lot of people are saying that government doesn't fit. So it's a pretty challenging time. And it's challenging because I love, by the way, with all due respect, sir, for who my base is, I love coming to the Rotary because you are all dedicated to service. And when I'm in front of people who dedicate themselves to service, I'm talking to people. I started a nonprofit around what do we do for our city. I was a member of the Greenwood Community Council. I was a member of the Greenwood Finney Chamber of Commerce. Karen Lee and I were co-officers of the Graduate and Professional Student Senate. And we worked on, and that was service to our constituency then, the students. We worked on housing for them. We worked on health care benefits. And I got something started that Karen finished, which was we got health care benefits for TAs and RAs. And, you know, so I know that you're here because you believe in this community and you believe in this city. So how do we weather this storm together? You know, how do we keep pulling ourselves out of it? What do we do right? And it's challenging. I mentioned that so many people think government doesn't fit. Because government's supposed to be the place where we come together in a democracy to solve problems that can't be solved by a business, can't be solved by an individual alone, can't be solved by a community group alone. That's where we're all supposed to come together to solve problems. So that's the challenge in front of us. So I'll try to give you some thoughts about what I think we can do collectively to address and to keep improving. And things are improving a little bit. I mean, we can see it. We see some cranes up where there weren't cranes before, right? We see the attractiveness of our city. We're still high ranked as a place for people to come. We see some new software companies opening up. We see Amazon doing well. But we also know, again, that the depth of the income inequality, the struggles of new immigrant and refugees, you know, the challenges of people who feel like they're trapped where they are. So what's important? So I'm going to suggest to you there are 3 things that are really important. And you can try to guess what they are and then at the end compare. 1, innovation. We have to be innovative. And that's not new economy or old economy. No matter what type of business you're in or nonprofit you're in, we're going to have to innovate. And not only that, it has to be an era of frugal innovation because there's not a lot of free cash floating around no matter where you are. So you have to innovate. And so for our shipyards, for our steel mills, they have to figure out how to produce more steel with less electricity. And Nucor does that. They produce more steel with less electricity than any steel mill in the nation. And it's innovation around this new cloud computing thing, which everyone's moving to the cloud. Well, one of those companies, Isilon, is expanding in Pioneer Square. So we have to be a place that supports innovation, and we have to reward it, and we have to attract innovators to our city. And we're going to attract innovators by having a high-quality place to live, good educational system like UW, arts, culture, nightlife, all of those things are things where people want to come and be innovative. But what else do we need to be innovative? We need to be educated. So that's number two. One is innovation. We have to support innovation, cultivate innovation, and in government we're going to have to be more innovative too. Education. I mentioned institutions of higher education, but it also has to be our school district. We doubled our families and education levy because we're going to go deeper into the schools and the kids that need it the most, and thank you to the voters of Seattle for doing that. We know our Seattle public school system needs to be better, and they're in a time of transition right now. Right? The interim superintendent doesn't want to apply. We have some new school board members. This community is going to have to come together to try to help provide some support to that institution as it moves forward and make sure that we get through this transition and be stronger, because they have been making progress. The test scores are getting a little better. Some of the troubled schools aren't as troubled as they were, and they can't do it alone. So they've got huge cuts at the state level, and that's the other storms we're facing. But we've managed to supplement some with our own families and education levy locally, money that comes to the city that we can use for programs that can target those most in need and help address the achievement gap that we see between certain minority students and majority students, and schools that aren't performing as well. And if those schools can perform better, then those kids can get those jobs that are being created here. That's one of the things that bothers me most as a mayor. When I go somewhere and I learn that somebody doesn't want to hire locally, or they can't hire locally because the kids and young adults don't have the skills locally. But the jobs are being created, and they are being created. In our healthcare industry, they're being created. In our software industry, they're being created. In our maritime sector, they're being created. But our local kids and young adults don't have the skills. So that's the other piece of the educational program is how do we get very serious about pathways to careers? Not just get someone through K-12 and hand them out with a diploma. And we know that's not good enough, by the way. 1 year of post-secondary education is highly correlated with a living wage job. High school diploma alone is not anymore. And it doesn't have to, it can be a year of, working towards a BA. It can be a certificate. It can be a trade. It can be some other type of training program, but it's highly correlated. So we're working in the city on something called Pathways to Careers, where we take a look at those growth sectors, work with our local community college and high school system to make sure that people are making those progressions. And we also have to make sure that they can make those progressions in ways that work for them. Not everybody can take a year off to go to school. And so, that immigrant who's working in a hospital, who may have some education from their home country, can we give them some classes at the hospital? Can we give them a semester's worth of credit over a year that gives them a certificate, and then gets to another certificate, then gets to a degree? So we have to try to figure out how we can reach people where they are. Education, innovation, next generation infrastructure. And this one's really fascinating because we look back, we've seen infrastructure that cities have wanted to build that are really important. Whether it was canals way back when, like if you wanted to be an important East Coast city, you wanted a canal to reach the middle of the country. That was the Erie Canal. That's why New York is the preeminent city. Then it was railroads. Everybody was racing to build the railroad first. Who got the railroad head at the Puget Sound was a big deal. Interstate highway system was huge and remains huge. None of these things are going to go away. Canals, railroads, interstate highways are still critical. But as we look forward, what's really critical? And I'm going to submit to you that fiber, optic, cable, and broadband infrastructure is the next generation infrastructure that we have to invest in to support innovation and to support our companies. Other countries are doing it, other cities are doing it, and it's going to carry ideas and commerce, just like all of those prior areas once did. we are working to try to make our dark fiber in the city available. We own miles and miles of fiber, stretches all over the city, connecting up our utilities, connecting up our school districts, but we only use it for public, our own purposes. We have extra fiber. It's called dark fiber. We're partnered with the UW. We've advertised. So anyone out there in the world, we'll make our dark fiber available if you'll wire up the entire U district, every home and business, to fiber optic cable. When we dug up Pioneer Square, and we're starting to get the offers back, and we're going to see whether one of them makes sense. In Pioneer Square, we were digging up a street to relocate utilities. So we said, okay, well, the street's dug up. Does anybody want to take advantage to lay some fiber optic cable to connect up companies? And Comcast took us up on the offer. It was a lot cheaper. We were already digging the ditch. They could just lay it. And they've already signed up, I think, 14 companies, and they have another 30 companies on the way in our Pioneer Square. So we're retrofitting our old historic buildings for the next generation of companies. And again, innovation is not old or new economy. It's both. But there's one other thing I want to say about that next generation infrastructure. It's that cool new thing, fiber optic, but it's also those tried and true old things. And that's what's fascinating. People like to locate in Pioneer Square, South Lake Union, Fremont, where Brooks headquarters wants to move, because they've got a nice walkable street grid, because there's transit, because there's historic buildings, and because there's a diverse, educated population that has a lot of creativity and talent, because there's something special about cities that ultimately relies on the people themselves. When you put creative people together from a variety of different backgrounds, from a variety of different disciplines, everything fascinating happens on the edges of disciplines. It never happens in the middle. It always happens on the edges. The ideas bounce from one to the other, and they pick up speed, and next thing you know, you got great new ones. And that's always what cities have been about, is that interaction between people. So I've gone over my 5. I'm getting close to going over my 10. So next generation infrastructure includes some of that old infrastructure too, making sure they have walkable communities, with high quality design and buildings, with lots of nice local businesses and mobile food trucks, which also are entrepreneurial opportunities. I'm connected with, streetcars. That old-fashioned infrastructure is new again. We're going to expand the streetcar in this city. It's played a big deal in the resurgence of South Lake Union. It's one of our higher performing lines now in terms of compared to bus lines. And the next one we build from King Street Station up to Broadway, we're going to build those cars here too. We're going to fabricate those streetcars here in Seattle. And there are 20 cities around the nation that are looking at streetcars. So if we can build them here for us, we might be able to build them for 20 other cities around the country, and we'll start exporting streetcars like we export ships and airplanes. It's the same welders. It's the same construction techniques. Just don't need wings. Doesn't have to be watertight, right? But it's the same stuff. And so we can create some good jobs here, too. So the next generation infrastructure is interesting. It's a combination of that high-tech connectivity that comes with fiber optic cable and all these devices that you are all politely keeping in your pockets, right? As well as that old-fashioned quality of a great community connected by transit. Those two things together, we've now described Seattle's competitive advantage in the world economy, right? High-quality place to live, arts, culture, nightlife, educational institutions, diverse population, new companies and old companies that are innovating. Our maritime sector report. Those things all together is what will make a city, will make our city remain competitive, and we're going to have to keep working on it together to do that. I'll stop and take questions now. Thank you very much.
Mr. Mayor, yesterday I drove by Seattle Pacific University and saw the tent city, and I suspect we have been living with tent cities for maybe 2 years. It appears to be systemic. I understand or believe this is an interest of yours. Where are we with stopping tent cities in Seattle?
Yeah. So the 10-year plan to end homelessness, which is, actually an extraordinary effort and a model nationwide. And one of the reasons it's a model is that the entities that fund housing, really got together to collaborate, so that those seeking funding for housing could send in one application and have it reviewed, one application at the same time, have it reviewed by the 4 different funders, which is the county, the city, United Way, and I'm trying to remember, state? Yeah. So that all of them could look at it together. And this city passed a housing levy, which substantially increased our funding for that. But even so, we're not building housing fast enough for those that need it, and there are some populations that are very resistant to it as well. So we do our one-night count, which is just a snapshot in time, but we're not seeing substantial reductions in the one-night count of people that are still living outside. Tent cities have become more accepted in the city of Seattle. And there was initially a lot of neighborhood opposition to them, and we had a consent decree which limited how long they could be in one place and for how long. But we recently got a Supreme Court ruling, or a court ruling, I'm not sure what court it was, that pointed out that it's part of the exercise of free religion. A church is entitled to offer shelter to people in need. So our ability to limit them is actually constitutionally limited, but putting that aside, it is a type of shelter that's better than sleeping, under the bushes or under the overpass. So we can expect to see more tent cities, and we have liberalized the rules for tent cities because it is an opportunity for someone to connect to services. That doesn't mean we want to back it off at all from our commitment to try to provide better, more stable housing opportunities for homelessness. But there's a bigger issue, which is why are people falling into homelessness? Who are more vulnerable to doing that, and what can we do to address that? And that is, in fact, at the 5-year point of the 10-year plan to end homelessness, that is one of the places where we've begun to try to focus our efforts as well, to get a better understanding of that and try to prevent that. Some of that is people who become homeless, some is substance abuse or mental health issues, and deep cuts at the state level are not going to help us deal with that. It's going to make it harder for us to deal with that population. Sometimes it's people slipping through the cracks of their own social safety net. There's no couch for them to sleep on anymore. There's no friend to put them up. There's no low-cost, affordable place. And I believe we have to be doing more from our side. Remember the old single-room occupancy hotel? That was a disfavored model. But one room, bath down the hall. We need to do more to encourage that. But there's a lot of neighborhood resistance to highly dense housing in neighborhoods sometimes, and we need to do more to encourage affordable marketplace choices that are between the subsidized and the more expensive market rate choices. And people in this room have worked on that as well.
Next question over here.
Yeah, this year in Rotary we're having kind of a fitness focus, so I'm curious as to how you lost the weight.
Yeah. Clean living. Okay, no. Low carb. I actually went down to group health one day, see my doctor, get a checkup, and he said, "How you feeling?" And I said, "I was feeling pretty good until I stepped on that scale a minute or two ago." And he was really good, really nice guy. I said, "Well, let's talk about that." He gave me a diet, gave me some ideas. It's low carb, the rice, pasta, cookies, sweets, everything that's out the window. I was already biking to and from work a fair bit, but I added some resistance exercise. Sleep, it's really hard to have willpower when you're tired. And it's really hard to fall asleep if an electronic device is on. So I turn off all electronics at 10:30 at night and pick up a book, and I'm usually out within 10 minutes. And there's something about the light from an electronic screen is like daylight, and it tricks your brain and keeps you up later. So those are the 3 main things. And just, I think I mentioned to you earlier, I wasn't joking with my first line about this job is hard. I go from morning till late almost every day. Occasionally I get a day off on a weekend, and I really wanted to bring to everybody I dealt with as much focus and energy as I could. And so I felt like I needed to be in shape, I needed to have my exercise, I needed to have my sleep, I needed to have my family time, I needed to have a little bit of repose once in a while. And I've just tried to be very, very disciplined about that because I'm going back to Bob's introduction. This is an awesome job, and it's not about me, it's about all of you, which is why it's a really awesome job. So I just want to give it everything I got for 4 years. Where do you want to go?
Are issues related to the tunnel behind us now?
Yeah, I wish, actually. I really do wish that. I think the public has spoken loud and clear. It was very important. I mean, you all know that I raised deep concerns about the soundness of the financing, the fact that the state was asking us to take on the risk of cost overruns. It was important to me that the public have a say in that. Well, the public had their say, and they said and I have to presume with all the coverage that they understood the risks, but they didn't see that there was any other viable alternative, and they wished to push ahead. And I respect that because that's who I work for. So, and I honored that before as well. While I was raising the policy questions from an operational standpoint, my staff was always working closely with SDOT, and not one engineering drawing or permit or anything else was slowed down while I raised the policy questions. But I worry about whether the questions are behind us because there's still $300 million in port financing, which has not yet been appropriated or allocated. We have an obligation to fund the seawall in the city of Seattle. That's an obligation that we entered into when we approved the financing deal, and that's a several $100 million cost, which a big portion of that will take voter approval. $400 million of the financing plan depends upon whether you can collect tolling revenue from it, and there's a lot of concern. I still have concerns, and others have concerns that traffic will use other routes and we won't get the revenue from it. So there remain risks with the financing plan. Of course, there's always risks when you go underground. But the policy direction from the public is clear, and I'm following it.
Next question right here.
Some of our visitors today, Consul General Sung and the leaders of the International Field Conservation program at the zoo, are indicative of this club's international interests. And I was wondering what opportunities you see ahead for your role in advancing Seattle's international future.
That's a really good question, and I'll tell you, it's not one I often get. It's kind of funny. I go to town halls all the time, and I say this. I'm going to start up really high and talk about big issues, but I know you're going to take me local. And, it's like, have you ever been to the corner of, 30th and such, man? And have you seen those potholes? And so we always talk very locally. And I have to admit, I have been, in fact, very, very focused locally. So we have an Office of Intergovernmental Relations. We recently hired somebody whose focuses on supporting our sister cities. We have about 30 of them. It's always my job to make time for those sister cities and for people visiting our city and to promote the city to our friends around the globe. There's a question about what types of export support I could provide or trade relations I can provide, and that's always a little tricky. Because, the mayor flying off somewhere when there's a pothole right on your corner can concern people. So I'm still navigating that one, frankly, how to deal with that. But I like working locally. I'm a community council and neighborhood guy. I like working locally. So we're working on that. I will say one thing. I learned something from the trade folks when they came visit me from the Obama administration. Tourism's an export. I never knew that. It's actually an export. People give us dollars for something we have. People from a foreign country give us dollars for something we have. So we export our scenery and quality of life just like we export apples and wheat. So we do have the hotels downtown have agreed to a $2 a room tax to promote tourism, and I'm happy to promote that export as much as I can. And you will likely hear announcements soon of some things we're going to try to do support international work as well. But it's going to be in a limited amount over the course of my 4 years because I really am focused on local budget, local issues. Hell,
Mr. Mayor,
council relations is pretty tricky too for me sometimes.
Mr. Mayor, you're halfway into your first term,
Yeah.
and I'm curious if you could just reflect on what might be you feel is your greatest accomplishment in your term so far, and with the benefit of hindsight, what do you wish you could do a redo on?
I love it. That's like that interview question, what's your greatest weakness? You know, it's always such a challenge. Don't you hate that? And I loved it when I could start asking it of people when I started interviewing people. Just see what they did, right? I believe that when I look back over the first 2 years at things that I feel good about, although I want to be very clear, there's a work in progress, and given the state of our economy and the needs of the people here, there's so much work to be done. I'm very pleased that we were able to build a very strong coalition around deepening investment in education. I also believe that I've made, and my staff have made a very strong effort to get deeply involved in education. When I ran for office, the tunnel was clearly a high-profile issue, but I raised broadband, transit, and education. In fact, I led with education. There were a lot of people that said, mayors don't have anything to do with education. That was like a criticism. Why are you talking about it? And I just can't accept that, because when you talk to citizens and residents of this city about what's important to them, they tell you education. So we did a very extensive youth and family initiative outreach. We heard from 3,000 people in town halls and caucuses. In addition to the levy, we have pulled together an education leadership group, which involves the Chamber, the Community College, the University, the United Way, Gates Foundation, Seattle Foundation, as well as the unions that have very significant training programs. Kind of like in the housing field, I spoke about how the funders get together. Well, we all fund education in one way or another. How can we collaborate? And that's one of the things that's led to the Pathway to Careers program that we're working on with the community college system. So what can we work on together? And we've developed something we call a roadmap from pre-birth to post-secondary. What are the important milestones? And we're starting to measure other spending in city government against that roadmap. What do we spend it on, and how good does it go? So that's another thing. It's related to this. We're trying to get more of an outcome focus on all of our spending in city government as well. And let me tell you what I mean by outcome focus, using that roadmap as an example. We asked our departments, how do you spend money that matches one of those important developmental milestones from birth to post-secondary? And oftentimes they measured it by number of children served. We had this many children go through the program. Well, that's a measure of something important, certainly, but it doesn't measure the more important thing. How is the child changed as a result of going through the program? How did their outcomes change? So we want to take that approach to much more of our budgeting across city government and our own budgeting that affects youth and families. We have a pilot program on that, and we want to expand it elsewhere. We've done other things that are very much behind the scenes, but we've started performance management. We are actually, and as part of that, we've been very, this is related to it, we're very transparent and open about what we do. The prior mayor had agreements with his department heads, accountability agreements that were secret. We've taken those accountability agreements, we call them performance agreements, they're all online. You can see what my expectations are for all my department heads, and so everybody can see what the expectation is for that department. And then we're now trying managers' work plans and grading their performance based on how well they go to those outcomes. Now you may think, well, that sounds really common sense. Well, it wasn't done in government, actually. So a new openness in government. I've done 36 town halls this year, about 30 the year before. I'm trying to say that government is open and responsive and transparent and accountable to the public. Now, I realize every elected official says that. But measure us. We're doing it. We're putting it all out there. So those are two things I feel good about. We got a jail contract with the county, which has saved us millions and millions of dollars instead of building a new one. I feel good about that as well. We're making progress on transit. We've made progress on broadband. And those are good things as well. If I can keep talking about good things, I won't have to do your greatest weakness. I mean, I know if I filibuster long enough, but I'm going to be honest and deal with that one as well. I think that as I look back, it kind of comes back to the weight question again in a way, or the I love my job question again. The role of the mayor in getting a deeper understanding of the role of the mayor day by day. That's my job, to understand the needs of every community and every person in this town, and to reflect that back to government, and then reflect what government is doing back to those communities, and involve and engage the community in action around it. Those are all values I held, but I would say that I have been learning how to do that better day by day, and I hope that will suffice to say that I acknowledge that that I have had much to learn, and I am grateful for what I have learned, and I remain open to learning more, because it is, as I've said before, it is such an extraordinary privilege to be able to serve the people of this city. Thank you.
Seattle Rotary Online is made possible in part by a grant from First Choice Health, working with the Washington Health Information Collaborative to use technology to bring better health care to patients throughout the Pacific Northwest. First Choice Health.